It's an interesting week for the Montreal Canadiens. They lose in a shootout to the Columbus Blue Jackets on Monday, getting a point and playing much better than they did previously. Then they lose by epic proportions by a score of 8-4 to the Washington Capitals on Thursday, finally breaking the losing streak on Saturday against divisional rivals the Toronto Maple Leafs by a score of 5-2. Some positive, a lot of negative. Let's talk some puck. Hey gang, Costa here from PuckTalk Montreal, welcoming you to this November 23rd edition of the show where we look back at the week it was for the Montreal Canadiens. And as we do that, let's talk about our sponsors. InstaCustoms.com is Canada's highest rated print shop with over 3,000 Google reviews and a 4.9 star rating. They offer direct-to-garment printing on all your favorite clothing, along with coffee and travel mugs, and they even offer embroidery. Habs won a Stanley Cup? You can win too on Stanley Street at InstaCustoms.com. CheapersTshirts.ca has men's, women's, and children's t-shirts, all sizes, hoodies too, with over 1,000 products to choose from. Anything you need for merchandise or the best deals on everyday clothing, CheapestTshirts.ca is your go-to source. Buy today, ship tomorrow, CheapestTshirts.ca. So as we look at the week that was for the Montreal Canadiens, it started out looking relatively good. The game against Columbus, they played well, could have gotten a little bit better goaltending. A couple of saves maybe would have changed the allure of this hockey game, especially late. But at the end of it all, Marchenko winning it in a shootout and the Habs coming away with a single point. Then we go to Thursday, where the Canadiens got their asses handed to them by the Washington Capitals. Most of that game, the Habs were trailing by 2 or more goals. Not to mention that Sam Montembeault got pulled after allowing 3 goals on 10 shots. The third one not looking good at all as the puck went right through him. So a lot of questions in goal that we're going to talk about as we move along in this show. And then on Saturday, despite the fact that Jakub Dobeš allowed one rather weak goal, he played relatively well and allowed the Montreal Canadiens to come away with a 5-2 win over the Toronto Maple Leafs, the Leafs now at the bottom of the Eastern Conference. So it was an interesting week for Montreal. Became more interesting on Saturday with word from Elliot Friedman that the Canadiens were looking at possibly signing Alexander Texier from the St. Louis Blues. The Blues had put Texier on waivers, or unconditional waivers, I should call it, for the purposes of buyout. And the Canadiens chomping at the bit, waiting for him to become a free agent so they could sign him. And that's exactly what happened. The Canadiens picking him up for $1 million this afternoon at 5 p.m., signing the forward, and he'll be joining the team on the West Coast trip. Also today, the Montreal Canadiens announced that they were finally bringing up Adam Engstrom. We've been calling for that for weeks. Engstrom, a very serviceable defenseman. I was trying to figure out why they kept on bringing up and putting back down Mark Del Gaizo. Maybe it's because of a salary cap thing. I don't know. But I thought that Adam Engstrom deserved to have that spot and be able to come up in case of an injury so that he could play. But he'll be going out west with the team as well. Probably practicing tomorrow and Tuesday before the Canadiens actually head out on the road. So it's going to be an interesting week. That said, we look back at the old week and we take a look at our studs and duds for the week of November 16th. So who are our studs and duds? Well, we've got 3 defensemen who I've qualified as studs, not because of the way they played in their own zone, but how they played offensively. Although I should take that back because Mike Matheson played extremely well on both ends of the ice. Not only was he out there killing penalties, but he was contributing offensively with goals and assists, setting up players beautifully. And so you got to give him a tap on the shoulder for playing so well. Then there's Noah Dobson, who played well offensively, although he did give up a couple of really bad goals against both Columbus and Washington. But at the end of the day, he made up for it on Saturday by scoring a pair of goals. Then there's Lane Hudson, who still continues to contribute on the offensive side of the puck and continues to move forward as far as defensive development is concerned. He's looked good as well. You also got to give a little bit of a tap as a stud to Josh Anderson, scoring in Columbus and then scoring a pair on Saturday to help the Canadiens beat the Leafs. He's been on fuego lately. And finally, the last guy you got to give some love to as a stud is Florian Xhekaj. He made his NHL debut with the Montreal Canadiens on Saturday night versus the Toronto Maple Leafs. Not only did he get an assist on Josh Anderson's first goal of the game, but he also beat the pulp out of Mermis in front of the net, getting the crowd on their feet and giving a little bit more energy to a Canadiens club that needed it coming out of a losing streak. Then there's our duds. Our duds, a little bit different. Number one dud, I hate to say this, and people are going to say I pick on him, both goaltenders, both Sam Montembeault and Jakub Dobeš. There is a lack of confidence in goal right now for the Montreal Canadiens. It's got to stop. Something's got to turn a corner. From Samuel Montembeault, his game hasn't been good since the preseason. As for Dobeš, he started out strong, but then after he wasn't played for a while, he went relatively cold. And now both goaltenders are struggling. Eric Raymond, he needs to work with them on specifics. And from what I saw at practice, he's still working on the same garbage, keeping Montembeault deep in his net when he needs to be able to come out to the top of the crease. As for Jakub Dobeš, he just needs a little bit more confidence. He's got to get more square to the shooter, not allow him much room. His angles are off by a bit. So as long as he works those angles and Montembeault starts to play a little bit further out in his crease, we may very well see better goaltending from the Canadiens. But it's up to Eric Raymond, their goaltending coach, to actually correct that. Then comes the defensive unit as a whole. Every single defenseman. Doesn't matter who you are, doesn't matter where you play. Man to man, forwards as well. It's been absolutely putrid. Allowing 8 goals versus Washington showed an absolute lapse in defensive ability. One of the things that I pointed out that I'm going to bring up here, yes, I gave Noah Dobson a stud, but as a dud, he could be in that list as well. Because on the Werenski goal on Monday and on the Chychrun goal on Thursday, he backed off instead of going after the player that when he wasn't covering anybody. If you're engaged with somebody in man-to-man, then it's forgivable. I don't have a problem with it. But Dobson had nobody. Came out, saw that Werenski was coming towards the net, and instead of going towards the player to try to get the puck away and try to force him to make a play, he backed off completely, allowing Werenski to just continue skating in until he got to the hash marks and ripped it past Jakub Dobeš. The same on the Chychrun goal versus, when I believe it was the 4th Washington goal, and the first one scored against Jakub Dobeš. It was the same thing again. Dobson coming out, seeing Chychrun coming in, backing off, and allowing him to come in and clap one past Dobeš. That stuff has to stop. As a defensive unit, when you're playing man-to-man, there are 2 things that you need to do. Number 1, you need to mirror the players that you're covering. And number 2, you have to finish your body checks and make sure you stay within a stick length of whoever you're covering. You can't allow these big gaps. That's what Dobson did. That's what a lot of players did. And that's how the Washington Capitals managed to score 8 goals against Montreal. And so that particular part of the game has to change. We've seen Struble struggle. Wow, that's hard to say. Arbor Xhekaj, who was much maligned in the past, seems to have started to understand the system that Marty St. Louis is trying to play. Mike Matheson, he's been relatively good at moving side to side and covering guys in his own zone. Same for Lane Hudson. But when you take a look at Dobson, you take a look at Carrier, who struggled mightily, falling down on certain occasions as well, especially on one of the 2 goals scored by Sonny Milano on Thursday. I mean, there's a lot to be said about the Canadiens' defensive woes. Then comes the power play, another dud. It hasn't been able to do anything this past week. And yes, the Canadiens made changes. They put Bolduc up. Now they've moved back to having Ivan Demidov there. And the power play did look better as far as its gameplay on Saturday, but it still wasn't able to produce any points. The Canadiens need power play goals when the opportunity affords itself. Earlier in the season, the power play was firing, and the Canadiens were lethal, both with the man advantage and at 5-on-5. Now, one-dimensional at 5-on-5, teams not so afraid of the power play. The power play needs to find its teeth again. And so we'll see whether or not this move back to Demidov is going to change anything. The other thing they did as well on one power play is they took Slavkovsky out from the front of the net, left Bolduc there. So we'll see what happens. It's a variance. Marty's trying to find that chemistry. We'll see how it goes. There are also a few forwards that did not make an impact. Granted, we saw Joe Veleno finally score his first goal as a Montreal Canadien this week, but overall, he's been good defensively, but hasn't really been able to bring anything forward offensively. The same holds true for, guys like Kapanen. Not much as far as production is concerned this week, but he is creating chances, and that's all you can ask for. The finish is one thing, and that's where the Montreal Canadiens lack depth. It's finish, right? And we talk about it time after time, and it's starting to happen now, especially in the game versus Toronto. The Canadiens started peppering the goaltender. They actually wore out Joseph Wall, forcing a goaltending change after they scored 4 goals. That's more of what I want to see from the Montreal Canadiens. Don't worry about being perfect with your shot. Pepper the goaltender. Force him to work. The more you make him work, the more tired he gets. The more tired he gets, the more mistakes he makes. The more mistakes he makes, the more goals and opportunities you may score. So that's the most important part for the Montreal Canadiens. They got to start getting a lot more continuity when it comes to their offense. It can't just be one line. And one line in general that disappeared this week was Caulfield, Suzuki, and Slafkovsky. While Slafkovsky did play well the other night versus Washington, the first 2 games he played alongside Kapanen and Demidov, not so great. And Bolduc didn't really bring much to the table when it came to that line. So we'll see whether or not Marty continues with those lines or whether or not he flip-flops Bolduc with Slafkovsky to see if he can get more chemistry out of that second line. But overall, we had a lot of positive performances, but that power play just needs to get better. I mean, it's the biggest dud of the week, I would say, the power play. It really let the Canadiens down. Now, as we talk about the Canadiens being down, now they're up. They won on Saturday, and their positivity is a little bit better. So that brings us to next week in HabsNation, where the Montreal Canadiens are going to face off against 3 teams out west, starting with the Utah Mammoth on Wednesday night. That may very well be a difficult challenge for the Canadiens. Where are we here? The Mammoth. Where are we? How did they do this week? Where are we? Here we go. The Mammoth went, 0-1-2, losing 2 games in overtime and losing 1 in regulation versus the Vegas Golden Knights on Thursday. I believe the Mammoth are playing tonight, so we'll see how it goes for them. But at the end of the day, the Mammoth not really as tough a team to match up against the Montreal Canadiens. The Canadiens need to continue what they're doing against them. They need to keep moving their feet. They need to keep being aggressive. They need to keep forcing the other team to make mistakes. That against the Toronto Maple Leafs will work to perfection, and that's what they need to continue to do. Then comes the more difficult part on Friday and Saturday. Of course, as we know, this week is American Thanksgiving. And so what happens? Well, on Friday, the Canadiens play at 4 p.m. versus the Vegas Golden Knights, then follow up on Saturday against the Colorado Avalanche. And the Colorado Avalanche are red hot right now. Winners of 3 straight against the Islanders, Rangers, and the Predators. We'll see what the week that comes brings to the table, because they've got a few games before they face off against the Habs on Saturday. But the Colorado Avalanche are the cream of the crop when it comes to the Western Conference. A very difficult team to face off against, with the likes of McKinnon, Makar, and so on. So we'll see how that works out. But when you take a look at Western Conference teams, of course, after their first little stint out west, the Canadiens didn't really fare well against a lot of those teams. So they're going to need to bring a better effort, whether against Vegas, Colorado, or even Utah. The Canadiens need to put their best foot forward. And then comes the question, who starts in those games? Yes, you've got a back-to-back, so obviously both goaltenders are going to play in that back-to-back. But who gets the nod? Personally, it's difficult to say, but given how bad Sam Montembeault looked against the Washington Capitals, I have a hard time starting him against the Golden Knights. So I would start Montembeault against the Mammoth on Wednesday. Then I would go to Dobish on Friday, and then Saturday, depending how each one of them plays, I'll decide. But the thing is, if the Canadiens really want to put their best foot forward right now as it stands, and it's no slight on Montembeault, it's just fact. He's not playing very well. So I would give 2 games to Dobish, 1 to Montembeault. If Dobish falters, then you change the parameters. But we need to see some progress from Sam Montembeault. Not only is he out of position, not only is he spinning in his crease, not only is he playing too far back in his goal, but he's allowing pucks through him now. That's not something that Montembeault normally allows. So it's continuing to spiral downward for him. And I hope he gets out of it. I never want to see a goaltender, or any player for that matter, go into a slump that makes him look bad. But this is beyond anything I've seen from Sam Montembeault. Since he came over from Florida, he's gotten better and better. And now he got to a point where it's starting to come down the other side of that pyramid. And that's not what you want for a goaltender. Because the minute that slide begins, nobody knows where that ends. He needs to plateau and stop the slide. He needs to get back his confidence. He needs to play to be able to do that. But you need to start playing him against a little bit weaker competition so that he can get that confidence back. If you play him against upper echelon teams who have a propensity to score a little bit more often, like the Washington Capitals, then you get that same result. I understand why Marty started him against the Capitals. He thought he had a better chance to win based on Montembeault's track record against him. I get it. But you've also got a team out there where it's not just about the goaltenders. It's about defensive coverage. A lot of what we saw this week was all about the Canadiens unable to cover their teams defensively, the opposition defensively, right? And kind of leaving their goaltenders, both of them, out to dry. And while, again, Montembeault allowed pucks to go through him, there were a couple of goals that Jakub Dobish could have stopped, Werenski and Chychrun, to name a couple. But his angles were off. Even the second goal that Sonny Milano scored on him, he outweighted Dobish. Dobish, impatient, was shuffling his feet, shuffled his way right out of the net, allowing Milano to shoot the puck on the far side and getting it in on the blocker side. Those are things that need to change. And what also needs to change is the defense needs to be a little bit more physical, a lot more engaged, and they need to be a lot more mobile. Being stationary when you're playing man-to-man doesn't work, and we've seen that a little bit from the Canadiens this past week. They get caught up deep in the zone, and then they lose track of who they have to cover. Teams are catching on. And so the decision has to be made from the coaching staff, whether or not the Canadiens can stay with the man-to-man, or if maybe they're better served going to box plus one. Because box plus one, at least at that point, you still have 4 guys covering the 4 areas of the defensive zone when a player's engaged either behind the net or along the boards. It remains to be seen. The decision is going to have to be made one way or the other. But overall, I got to say, I'm completely happy with the fact that the Montreal Canadiens came out of their slump. I'm completely happy with the play of some of the defensemen offensively, but we need to become more consistent and much more responsible in our own zone, take care of our own house, so that getting out on offense is going to be much more fluid and a lot more productive. See you next time.